Okay guys, so let's get started. So first of all, you should download this project, like the starter project that isn't yet like finished, but you get all the like visuals, so you don't have to build like the form yourself, and we can jump straight into the authentication. So you will download this archive over here called starter project, and you can find the link in the description. So now we need to extract it somewhere. I've prepared a folder for it. I named it Code Worker Authentication. So I'm just going to drag and drop all of these files over here, and now I can close that. And also I've opened like Visual Studio Code, and I've already opened that folder. So now these are the files that we get out of the box, and let me just zoom in. Okay, like this. So now let's test that this works. So open your terminal. Now if you're on the Windows, I strongly suggest you install this commander, because it is pretty good. It allows you to use like the Linux commands, and just using like the standard command prompt like really isn't the best experience, at least in my opinion. So if you want, you should pause this video and download this. Just Google this name and download. It will also come in archive if I'm not mistaken, and you just need to extract it somewhere. So anyway, once that's done, let's simply test to see whether this works. So let's go node.app.js. Oh yeah, okay, so first of all we need to install all the dependencies. So now you have two options. You can either use npm or you can use yarn. I'm using yarn, but the commands should be pretty similar. So I'm going to go just yarn install. You would type npm install, and let's wait a few seconds. Okay, so now that's done. Now let's try again typing node app.js, and let's see what happens when we go to the port 5000. So let me change this. This was my old previous project running, and now we get the same thing, but if I'm not mistaken, this one shouldn't work at all. So if I try to put something over here, anything really, yep, it doesn't work. So it's our job to make it work. Okay, so to get started, let's reference back the diagram that I shown you in the last video. Okay, so this is what we need to do. So let's start ticking off these steps one by one. So first of all, we need to get sign up data in our server. So let's do that. Okay, so now let's navigate to the routes folder, and then there we have two files. Index file is just used for rendering the home page, and users file is used to, well, it will be used to do all the things regarding authentication. So right now we need to get data from that form in our server. So we need a post method to this /register, because what's happening is, if you take a look at the views folder over here and you find the register.handlebars file, you will see that that's a form, and the action is to send the post method to this URL, so to the /user/register. So now if you navigate back here, let's write that method. We don't have it here currently, so let's write dot post, and then we want to get request response next, and let's use it as an arrow function, like this. So now let's see what can we access with the request.body object. So let's simply console.log request.body, and let's see what's in there. So now we need to restart the server. Okay, and let's see what happens when we fill that sign up form. So let's say I put again code worker. I'll put code worker like this. I'll say test as a password, and you know what, let me make this always on top so we can see it like this. So now if I click sign up, we see that request.body contains all of these fields. So that's a step in the right direction. So now let's see what the next step is. So the next step is we need to check if the input was correct. So if you take a look here, we need to enter the password twice. So that's one thing that we need to check. And we also need to check that the first information over here is indeed in the email format, and that username is just plain text. So let's do that. For that, we're going to use Joy to handle the validation part. So first of all, let's install it. Again, I'll be using Yarn, but you're free to choose between both npm and Yarn. So I'll type yarn add joy. If you use npm, you would type npm install joy -- save. Okay. Okay, so Joy is the package for the validation, and it's really cool in my opinion because it allows you to like create a schema and then like validate like a bunch of like fields against that schema, and you don't need to like validate every field like by hand. So once that is installed, we need to require it up above here. So let's get a reference to it. So const joy equals require joy, like this, and then we need to create a schema. Before we move along, I just wanted to show you like this is a GitHub page for Joy. So if you want, you can pause this video and read a little to get a better sense, but pretty much what we'll be doing is we need to require it, then we need to build our schema. So we need to describe like what data are we expecting from that register form, and then once we have that, we can pretty much validate our request.body against that schema, and this will produce a value for us that we can save in a similarly named variable, and then we can check whether there is any error inside, and if not, everything is good. So you can of course read like much more about it here, but anyway, let me show you what we need to use it like for now. Okay, so what we need to do is to write that schema. So let us write it over here. For example, let me say validation schema, and what we need to do is to write user schema. So let's save that schema in a variable called user schema, for example, and then we need to type joy.object, and that object has keys method, and on that method we pass object like this. So now we need to describe like field by field over here. So first of all, let's reference back the form. Okay, so I need to restart the server. Okay, let me refresh this site and let me go on the sign up page. So first of all, let's validate the email address over here. So I can come here, I can type email, and email should be of a type joy.string. So there is a special method that you want to use whenever you want to make sure that something is string. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And then we have another method that is called email. So for example, you can delegate that checking for the email format to the Joy using this method over here. And then we can write optional required to like chain another function there, which will make sure that this field over here called email must be present. Otherwise, the validation, the server-side validation will fail. So that's it for the email. Next, let's do a similar thing for the username, which is next. So username is a bit simpler. Username is pretty much a string, and then we can type required. Of course, you can navigate back to the GitHub page. You might want to like limit username in terms of how many characters you're going to allow, perhaps anything between 3 and 30 or things like that. But I'll leave that up to you if you want to experiment. Next we need to handle the password field over here. So password is a kinda interesting one because this secondary password, which is actually like the confirmed password, will need to rely on the first password, like they need to be the same. So you will see how that can be done. So for the first password, it will be easier password and then joy.string. But now we want to maybe limit what can someone type in as a password. So we could put it like this, and that would be fine. But just to show you something, you can use regular expressions over here. Now if you're coming new to this and you aren't used to regular expressions, they're really neat thing that you should put on the back burner and learn at some point, because regular expressions allow you to like describe some pattern that you want to match. In this case we want to describe like the format of the password that we want to accept pretty much. So we call this method .regex, and then we pass here the regular expression. Now the regular expression must be between two of these slashes, and then what we want is to describe that pattern. Now we can use this caret symbol to specify the start of text. So like whatever we describe next must be like found at like the start of this password. So we can continue with that. And let's say that we want to allow any letter between A and Z, both uppercase and lowercase, and that we also want to allow all the numbers between 0 and 9, pretty much any number. But we don't want to allow any special characters like exclamation mark and things of that nature. So how can we do that? Well, we need to describe them as a sets. So you open these square braces, and then you type from A to Z. So that will make sure that any letter between those two, including those two, is valid. Now if you want to have like uppercase letters, you need to do that again, but using the uppercase letters, so A through Z, uppercase, and try to guess it yourself how you should specify numbers. Well, in similar manner, you would type 0 to 9, like this. And then we can write here a dollar symbol, which means that this should be here the end of the password. How you can read this is pretty much, okay, at the start of the password, I expect to see this, and then I immediately expect to see the end of the password. Now if you want to specify how long the password is allowed to be, you can use these squiggly braces and type two numbers from 2. So for example, if you want like minimum 3 letters, maximum like 30 letters, actually characters, because we are using both letters and digits, sorry about that, you would type 3, 30, like this. Okay, I hope this wasn't too confusing, but if you don't have any experiences with regex, if this didn't make sense, you can pretty much get rid of this altogether and use this, or maybe you can use it and then later like do some googling and learn more about it, because they're pretty commonly used, I would say, and it's one of those things that's nice to know at least a bit. And then we want to say that is required as well. Now let's move on and do the confirmation password. And how can we do that? Well, Joy provides a special method called valid, and then we can say something like this. So we can say, okay, it needs to be Joy. We can say it can be anything, but it should be valid as long as it is the same what we put here. It is pretty much like whitelisted. So we can so what we want to do is pretty much to have this password over here. So how can we do that? Well, again, using Joy, we can reference this password over here by using the special function called ref, and then giving it a name that is specified on the left side over here. So we can type joy.ref and then give it a name, and the name is password. So we want to reference this field over here by using this, and then we can say that it is also required, like this. And now this is done. Now if you're wondering like how did I came up with these names, if you take a look at this register handlebars file over here, you'll see that that's how I named them over here. So we have name equals email, we have email over here, we have name equals username, we have username over here, etc. So when we pass request.body to this joy function and test it against this schema, the mapping would be like 1-to-1 between this schema and these values that we are getting from the request.body, if that makes sense. Like, just a quick side note, like whenever you want to get some data from the post, from the form, the input fields needs to have a name attribute, and whatever name you put here is how they will arrive over here, if you remember. So we had email, username, password, and confirmation password over here. That's because of that. I'm sorry if you know all of this. I just want like all of us to be on the same page moving forward. Okay, so that's done, and now we need to validate actually this request.body against this schema. So how can we do that? Well, we can call the joy.validate, and then we can provide two arguments. First argument is the what we want to validate, so we want to validate request.body. Second argument is against what schema. Well, we just defined this schema up above, so let's use it like this. And this function over here will produce a new object for us, so let's store it somewhere. So let's say const result equals that, and for now let's simply console log the content of the result so we can see what's in there. So I'm going to comment out these lines so that doesn't confuse us, and let me restart this server once again. Let me navigate back here, let me refresh this page for good measures, and let's put here again the same values. So test for password. You can see is the following. So the result is object, it contains property called error, which is currently null, meaning no errors, and then we have sub object value that contains all the values that we passed. So now if I try to mess this up on purpose, let's say the password doesn't match. Let's say I put test with 1 over here, and I try it once again, you'll see that we get this long descriptive error that the confirmation password fails, because confirmation password must be one of the password and it doesn't matches, so that's why it fails. Okay, so now this is working. So what we can do really quickly before we finish with this video is we want to pretty much alert user about this error. So how can we do that is we can use flash messages. If you aren't aware of them, we are using this dependency over here, connect flash, and then we also have to create some global variables so that we can access them in the view layers. So first of all, let's do exactly that. What I need to do here is after this line app.useFlash, but before these two lines, I want to type app.use, and then we want to create a new middleware over here. And for now, what this middleware should do is just set up some locals. So let's call one success messages, and that's going to be equal to request.flash success. And let me copy this one and paste that, and just do the same for the error messages. And we need to call next here, otherwise this will get stuck here forever. So with that out of the way, we can now come back to our user's route over here, and we can check whether the result contains any errors. So if result.error, if there is any error, we want to notify user and like abandon like all the potential work over here. So we can say request.flash, that is using that module that I just described, and we need to specify type of message. Well, certainly this is going to be error one, and then we need to provide some message over here. So we can provide something like data is not valid, please try again, something like this perhaps. And then we need to redirect user to that form once again, so we can use the res.redirect slash users slash register. And then let's just return from that, so we don't keep on executing lines below. So I can move this over here like this, and let me save that and let me restart this once again. Yeah, refresh this as well. Okay, so now we have this sign up. Let me try to mess up something on purpose once again. So test and test one, and you see this error, data is not valid, please try again. If I don't mess anything, nothing should happen. Yeah, okay. So right now we've done these two tasks, and the next task is checking if the email already exists in database. Now I think that is good to leave for the next video, because this one is already way much longer than I thought it would be, which is funny. But yeah, the next task is going to involve database, and if I start that now, this video will just like blow up in the length, so let me not do that. I hope you enjoyed this video. I apologize if I went way into some details that you already knew, but this series is targeted at like someone who wants to learn authentication and authorization like for the first time using Node. I just want to make sure that no one is left behind pretty much, and that's that. Okay guys, so this is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed this one. This one may be a bit too boring because we didn't do anything really like interesting that has to do with authentication, but we need to build foundation for that, and starting with the next video we're going to do just that. So it's going to be more and more interesting, I hope, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.